April 2021, in the UK, a group of young people working with the charity worldwrite decided to create a case against vaccine passports. We wanted to add our voices in opposition to the sanctions these vaccine passports entail on citizens. So, with webcams and mobile phones, we interviewed friends and family to create this short campaigning film.
I am very much against the idea of COVID vaccine passports. I feel like a whole year of my life has already been controlled. I've been told when and when I can or can't see my friends and family, what I can and can't do, told when I can leave my house, when I can go to the shop, when I can do the things I want to do. Obviously, I've followed all the social distancing rules. I've made sure that I'm safe, made sure that other people feel safe, made sure that my housemates feel safe. And the idea that I need this other document or a check mark above my name to make sure that I can do things again, I just don't think it's necessary.
I mean, if you cast your mind back 18 months ago, think of all the things that you could just do. Think of all the places that you could just turn up spontaneously with whoever you choose. Now, as we emerge out of lockdown, we're told that in order to get our freedoms back, we're given this kind of devil's bargain. We have to have the state's permission to do everything. We have to have the state's permission to go to the pub, to go to a restaurant, to go and see a football match, see a concert. That means that we effectively exist at the license of the state, and we have to effectively prove our health to them at all times. Your rights and freedoms should not be dependent on your health status. That is completely immoral and wrong.
I think that vaccine passports are a bit of a slippery slope because they convert human rights, like going out, into a privilege. Like we're puppies being given a biscuit for being good and having the vaccine.
We also have a society where, in an unprecedented way, we will have to show our papers to be able to access domestic travel, domestic services.
If you think about the amount of effort and money that will go into devising some sort of digital passport screening checkpoint at, all pubs and clubs, and to use them internally is quite bizarre.
Making sure we have a face mask, maintaining a 2-metre distance, it's become mentally exhausting. And now we're finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, but the government want to continue to create a fear-driven narrative. The need for certification also seems confusing and somewhat contradictory, given that currently there is not enough evidence to suggest the vaccine prevents the transmission of COVID-19, but rather lessens the severity of your symptoms if you catch COVID, then it makes no real difference if you're surrounded by people who have or have not received the vaccine.
For now, it's been rolled out in the hospitality industry on a trial basis as of April 2021. But it sets a dangerous precedent. If the trial is approved, then it'll be used for other things, like it might be used for getting a job, for example. It might be written into contract for that, or for getting accommodation.
It's strange to me that, last year the Prime Minister had said that he would never consider COVID passports, and now there's been a U-turn and they're thinking of considering it, for flights and for venues.
We have to be aware of the fact that, this measure is coming in really at the very end of the crisis. The vaccination program has been extraordinarily successful. Even as it pretends that it's easing us into freedom, it says, no, actually, we still have a bit of control over you. It's still up to us to decide what you can and can't do, where you can and can't go, who you can and can't see. And that's incredibly dangerous. It's the creation of a papers, please society, Checkpoint Britain, as some people are calling it.
Winning the case against vaccine passports matters. Whatever happens following the domestic trials, we know they are already on the cards for travel overseas, and it is not good news.
If I don't have the vaccine, probably some countries will not allow me to enter in them. So I don't think this is freedom anymore. I agree if the countries ask me to do the test. I agree the quarantine, but I don't agree with the fact that To travel, I need this passport, or this passport change something, or somehow how the other country sees me. If I don't have the vaccine, I will be seen as a threat to that country, and this goes against my rights as citizen.
I haven't seen, for instance, my grandma in coming up to 2 years now, because she lives in Italy and we're following the restrictions and guidelines for both countries. I followed the rules and still I don't get my biscuit. As an 18-year-old, I might not be able to get the vaccination in time for this summer and won't be able to see my nonna again, regardless of whether she's taken the vaccine or not.
We know a lot of people will say that this is just about keeping healthy, but surely fearing our fellow citizens rather than supporting them is bad for everyone's health.
You know, there's this idea that vaccination passports will help us get us back to normal. I mean, what we're kind of normal, but they'll get us back to normal because they'll reassure people. They'll make people feel safe about attending an event that they otherwise wouldn't have. I completely disagree. I think that it increases the level of fear in society because it says that anyone who doesn't have this passport, whether they're vaccinated or not, whether they have the disease or not, it says that anyone who doesn't have this passport is unsafe.
Fear creates division. The vaccinated versus the non-vaccinated, the clean versus the unclean, which is actually a very backwards way of thinking. During the urbanisation of the Victorian era, the elite feared the great unwashed at their doorsteps, referring to the working class. Are we not doing the same thing?
What vaccine passports do, and what the government has been doing, it's been ruling us with fear. It hasn't been ruling us with hope and optimism, and it's been pretending to do that, but it hasn't. It's been making us afraid, and it hasn't been making us really. If you notice it, it hasn't really been making us afraid of the virus. It's been making us afraid of each other because we carry the virus. The vaccine passports will build on that. They will be there to remind us that there's something to be afraid of. There's someone to be afraid of. And, that will just segregate society even further and make us even more suspicious of each other and even more afraid of each other. And then some people will want to stay isolated from other people who haven't had the vaccine because they'll be perceived as a threat. And that is a terrible thing when we start dividing society up and creating tribes and pitting us against each other. That's the end of democracy. That's the end of a society when that happens.
Given how popular campaigns against discrimination and for equality have become, it is surprising that these proposals have not led to widespread protests and opposition. It's clear that their introduction will undermine the equality so many people have fought for.
Well, I think the worry for me is it could create a two-tier system of those with vaccine passports and those without. It could curtail people's freedoms enormously by differentiating between those with a COVID passport and those without. The whole essence of freedom could be at stake here, where companies or government could use this in a very discriminatory way.
The Discrimination Act 2010 outlines 9 protected characteristics that, for most situations, is illegal to discriminate on. In my view, vaccine passports discriminate against people based on 5 of these, and those are age, disability, pregnancy or maternity, race, and religion or belief.
If you separate out those people from ordinary society and say that they cannot take part in certain events, that is an outrageous kind of discrimination that we haven't really seen since really the bad old days, where you would have the signs of no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. That level of discrimination would become a fact of life. Even if you think about elderly people, I mean, what's most likely is that this kind of vaccine passport is going to take the form of an app rather than a piece of paper. Already we've seen, just as pubs recently opened, elderly people being turned away wrongly from the pub for not having the NHS app to take part in the test and trace facility there. So, that's a mistake. That shouldn't have happened. But you can see that this kind of thing happening in the context of vaccine passports too. We can see the problem for equality a mile off. Why isn't anyone speaking out about this?
It seems that the government has made the decision that for those who refuse the vaccine, they will be deemed outcasts from society and not able to enjoy all social aspects that others are able to.
You're not supposed to, be forced to get any kind of medical procedure against your consent. And they're being really, really weird about this. They're not saying you must get it, otherwise this and that. They're sort of coercing you. And yeah, it is blackmail. It is a form of blackmail. It's totally immoral. It's totally unethical. I really hope that enough people will be able to understand that.
Foundations of human rights since the end of the Second World War, since the Nazi regime, has been the right to refuse medical treatment. Now, it is a good thing to take the vaccine, but you should have the right to refuse. Vaccine passports take away that right. They're coercive. They say that if you don't, go along with the vaccine, if for some reason you refuse, or even if you just, are forgotten about, that you're not contacted and that you don't end up for whatever reason having it, you are then become a kind of second-class citizen where quite literally, matters of everyday life are denied to people simply because of their health status.
What are the implications for our privacy, we asked? And do we really need even more control on people's everyday lives?
Yeah, I feel like the government is pretty obviously using this as an opportunity to enhance the surveillance of people.
I think people shouldn't have to disclose their health status. There might be personal and sensitive reasons why people aren't able to have a vaccine, and people don't want to have to tell, everybody the reasons why. If there's a health condition they've got, that they don't want to tell a random person about that.
I think there's a sense of mission creep about the way the government is handling us in the name of a virus. So I'm an ex-teacher. I've never had a flu jab. I was never considered to be a danger when I was teaching young children. Flu kills a lot of young children every year, more than COVID. But we have behaved with flu in a way that we've been doing for years, and it's never been something that has been invasive. If you get ill, you stay home or you go to hospital, you get treatment. But I think one of the problems that I have with this is it's very invasive in terms of personal choice and personal freedom. So,
My worry is that what we're really seeing is, a government, a state that has assumed a hell of a lot of power over our lives over the last year or so, and is reluctant to give it up, and will only let us have our freedoms very slowly in exchange for other forms of control, other forms of monitoring. In terms of our health, there is no justification for this.
A lot of the proposals that technology companies have given the government involve using facial recognition software. And that's their way of counteracting the argument that people without smartphones won't be able to access it. And their answer to that is, okay, well, we'll use facial recognition software. So your medical data, your biometric material is linked to your face, and it can be gathered and analyzed without your consent wherever you go. They're opening the door to things like that.
Why? Lots of people ask, are the government even entertaining the idea of certification and passports? We don't have the answers, but these are questions that do need answering.
Boris Johnson's current stance is also contradictory. His suggestion that the national lockdown has had more of an impact on keeping hospital admissions and deaths down rather than the vaccine completely negates the vaccine's effect. The fact that his claim is scientifically incorrect, proven by 2 separate studies, makes the reason for his mention of it at all questionable.
They don't have the data to even show that vaccine passports would be beneficial. And I just feel like if they don't have the most rudimentary of information about those very basic things, how can they possibly be limiting people's ability to participate in public life due to not having it? It doesn't actually make any sense.
We know that the cultural sector and hospitality have already had a horrendous year. The introduction of these schemes is just going to make matters worse.
Well, I mean, I work in the arts, and to have a system like this where you are separating people and wanting that to be brought into a culture where it's all about inclusion and community and collaboration and, you know, getting people together and mixing things up and creating stuff together, it's absolutely alien to the cultural and arts and hospitality sector. So it works very much against the grain for us as a cultural sector. And I think it's horrible. I think it's horrible to have to make the choice to go to the cinema on the day for vaccinated people or the day for unvaccinated people. I think people will make a choice. I hope people will make a choice and support a growing list of cinemas and cultural venues that are saying they won't operate a vaccine passport system. And I hope that people will support those businesses. But yeah, I think it will decimate the very heartbeat of those businesses in that sector. It's not what we're about. We're not about segregating people.
Cinemas UK, they put out this excellent statement. They seem to have far more understanding of the ethical issues, the issues around discrimination than the government does. And they said quite clearly, hang on, we were putting on shows safely last year, in between lockdowns. We've demonstrated that we can be trusted to run our cinemas normally. Why do we need this extra layer? And why do we need, this extra layer of liability? Why do we need to distrust our customers and interfere in their privacy? People who own bars, pubs and restaurants, they don't want these passports. They know it's none of their business what your health status is. Can you imagine if every time you went to a club, the bouncer asked you what STIs you had? I mean, that would be obviously a disgraceful invasion of your privacy. It's the same with COVID. It's the same with your health status. They have no right to know this. They don't want to know this. The government has no right to force them into collecting this data.